What if the greatest psychologist of the 20th century had a vision before death? And no one took it seriously. Carl Jung, renowned for reshaping our understanding of the unconscious mind, didn't just leave behind theories and books. In 1944, after a near-death experience following a heart attack, he came back with something far more mysterious. Not just a story, not a dream, but a vision. He described floating above the earth, approaching a vast temple of radiant light. And at its center, he saw something that would haunt him forever. A living, breathing symbol that seemed to hold the very blueprint of the soul. To Jung, this wasn't fantasy. This was realer than real. And it came with a warning that most people live their entire lives asleep, never truly meeting the deeper self buried beneath ego and illusion. So why has no one told you about this? Why did Jung's final, most powerful message remain hidden in private journals and footnotes, ignored by the very world he tried to wake up? That's what we're going to uncover in this video. We'll walk through Jung's final vision, explore the meaning behind the temple and the living symbol, and ask the question that still echoes decades later. What was Jung really trying to tell us about the soul, the afterlife, and the truth we keep forgetting? Because maybe this wasn't just his vision. Maybe it was meant for you too. Let me take you back to a pivotal moment in the life of one of the most influential minds of the 20th century, Dr. Carl Jung. It was the year 1944. Jung, at the age of 69, suffered a massive heart attack that left him in a deep coma. While doctors scrambled to keep him alive, Jung was off somewhere else entirely. But what's remarkable isn't the medical recovery. It's what he saw while his body lay still. In his own words, he described floating far above the earth, detached from pain, from identity, even from time. He could see the curvature of the planet. He was out in space, looking back at our little blue world, not with fear, but with a profound peace. There was no ego, no name, just pure consciousness. Imagine that for a moment. You're hovering in the vast silence of the cosmos, watching life from afar, and somehow you're okay with letting it all go. Many who've had near-death experiences speak of light's tunnels or ancestors. But Jung's experience was different, deeply symbolic, deeply personal. Because just as he was drifting through this peaceful void, he saw it. A radiant temple, a structure shimmering with golden light, floating somewhere in that sacred space beyond space. He was drawn to it like gravity. He described it not as a physical building, but as a symbol, something sacred, ancient, and utterly magnetic. This was not just a place. It was a knowing. To Jung, this temple represented the heart of all truth, the seat of divine knowledge, or perhaps even the core of the human soul itself. As he approached, he felt a profound sense of homecoming, like everything he'd ever searched for was waiting just inside. But right at the threshold, he stopped. A presence, maybe spiritual, maybe symbolic, told him clearly, it is not your time. And just like that, the vision faded. He returned to his body, to the hospital room, to the weight of gravity, and the work he had yet to finish on earth. But that one glimpse that almost would shape the rest of his life's work. So what was this temple really? Jung later reflected deeply on that vision. He didn't call it a hallucination. He didn't dismiss it as brain chemistry. To him, the temple was an archetype, one of those deep collective symbols stored in the human unconscious. He saw it as a representation of the self, not the everyday self, the personality we put on like clothes, but the eternal self, the soul beneath all masks. In Jungian psychology, the journey of life isn't just about surviving or succeeding. It's about individuation. That's the process of becoming whole, integrating all parts of yourself, even the hidden, shadowy, repressed ones, into a unified, conscious soul. And in that moment, hovering near the temple, Jung realized he wasn't done yet. He wasn't allowed to enter the temple because there were still parts of himself he hadn't integrated. Still lessons to live, still darkness to illuminate. Think about that. What if death isn't the final test, but the final mirror? And whether you can pass through or must turn back depends on how deeply you've come to know your own soul. One of the most powerful things Jung reported during this vision was the sheer absence of ego. No titles, no worries, no ambitions. Just being. He said, "I existed in a state of objective insight." Everything appeared meaningless, yet profoundly meaningful. That may sound contradictory, but in a way, it reflects what mystics and monks have whispered for centuries. That true understanding comes only when the ego steps aside. Jung's view of the afterlife wasn't about harps and halos. It was about realization, about the soul reaching a level of awareness where illusion melts away. In space, gazing down at Earth, Jung saw humanity not as individuals scrambling in conflict, but as one organism deeply connected. The wars, the pride, the chasing all seemed petty from that higher vantage point. And yet his return wasn't bitter. It was purposeful. He knew he had been granted a preview, not the prize itself. It's as if life whispered to him, "You're close, Carl, but not quite. Go back. Integrate more. Heal more. Teach more." Here's where this becomes more than just a story about a Swiss psychiatrist. What if Jung's vision wasn't just his personal experience, but a window into something universal? He believed that we all carry these archetypes within us, the temple, the journey, the turning point between life and death. That maybe when our moment comes, we too will be drawn toward that same radiant threshold. And asked a quiet question: have you faced your shadows? Have you made peace with who you are and who you're not? Have you stepped fully into yourself? These are not questions to fear, but to live by. Because the temple isn't out there. It's within you, waiting, always waiting. And every act of honesty, every moment of awareness, every time you choose love over pride, you take a step closer to it. So Jung's experience, it wasn't just about death. It was about how to live so that when that final door appears, you're not just prepared. You're welcomed in. Now let's go deeper, because what Jung saw inside the radiant temple changed everything. As he hovered near the entrance of this luminous space, what he called a temple of light, something at its center caught his attention. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a god. It was a symbol, but not just any symbol. Jung described it as a mandala, a radiant living mandala, a glowing circular form that seemed to pulse with life itself. Not static, not carved in stone. It was moving, almost breathing, alive in a way that words can't fully describe. He later wrote, "It felt more real than life itself." Now think about that for a moment. More real than life. What kind of symbol does that? This mandala wasn't just decorative. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a message, a revelation in geometric form, a direct download from the soul. In Jung's lifetime of psychological work, the mandala always held deep spiritual meaning. He studied them in Eastern traditions, in Tibetan thangkas, in alchemical manuscripts, and even in the spontaneous drawings of his patients. They always emerged during moments of deep inner transformation. To Jung, the mandala is the symbol of the self, of the soul's blueprint, the image of wholeness we all carry within. Let's break this down. The circle in the mandala represented totality, a return to unity after fragmentation. The center point symbolized the origin of the soul and the unchanging core of who we truly are. The symmetry reflected the balance between opposites, the conscious mind and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, the masculine and the feminine, the ego and the divine. This wasn't abstract to Jung. It was sacred geometry in motion, a cosmic mirror. In that moment, hovering before this mandala, Jung wasn't analyzing, he was experiencing it, directly, viscerally. And what's most astonishing is this: he didn't just see the mandala. He felt it as if it were his own soul looking back at him. Great question. Jung believed the temple itself represented the realm of the eternal, what some might call heaven, others nirvana, or simply the self realized. And at the center of that temple, the living mandala. It was the heart of the soul's sacred architecture. He saw that this symbol wasn't personal, it was universal. It wasn't just about Carl Jung, it was about all of us. Each of us carries a mandala inside us, an inner pattern trying to make us whole again. And the more we align with it through dreams, through healing, through deep self-awareness, the closer we come to that radiant center. Now, some skeptics might say, this sounds like a dream. Or maybe it was just brain activity. But Jung was adamant this felt more real than anything I've ever experienced while awake. He didn't view it as metaphor. He viewed it as truth, an archetypal reality more fundamental than what we call normal life. He called it an encounter with the objective psyche, the layer of reality that underlies both spirit and science, myth and matter. And here's the thing. The mandala didn't just appear to him in that one moment. After he came back from the near-death experience, he began to see mandalas everywhere in dreams, in visions, even in his patient's unconscious art. It was like the veil had lifted. He had touched the pattern, and now it was calling him home. So let me ask you, if you could see the shape of your own soul, what would it look like? Would it be fractured, incomplete, unclear? Or would it resemble a mandala, balanced whole, radiant from the center? Jung's vision wasn't just about the afterlife. It was about how we live this life. The mandala invites us to return to center, to face what's been hidden, to embrace the parts of ourselves we've exiled, and to remember wholeness isn't perfection, it's integration. You don't have to be flawless. You have to be real, and the more real you become, the clearer your mandala shines. Carl Jung didn't just study symbols, he became the symbol. He walked into the space between life and death and brought back a vision so profound it still ripples through the world of psychology, spirituality, and soul searchers today. The living mandala he saw wasn't just art. It was a map, a mirror, a reminder that even in death there is design, even in the unknown there is pattern, and even in the deepest silence, your soul has a shape calling you inward always. What Carl Jung experienced in that luminous realm wasn't just a beautiful vision. It wasn't meant to be a personal comfort or a mystical curiosity. It was, in his own words, a message, a warning. Not just to him, but to all of us. When Jung returned to his body after the near-death experience, he didn't shrug it off as a hallucination. No, he felt changed, awakened, and burdened with insight, because what he saw in that temple and what he wasn't allowed to enter wasn't just about the afterlife. It was a reflection of the spiritual state of humanity. A mirror showing us how far we've drifted from our true center. Jung believed that humanity's greatest danger was not destruction, not disease, not war, but disconnection from the soul. He saw that modern man, for all his progress and technology, was spiritually homeless. Why? Because we've become trapped in the ego, the false self, the identity built on image, ambition, control, status. We live outward, constantly chasing, proving, performing. But inside there's a silence we're too afraid to face. Jung wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And this is the tragedy: we've forgotten who we are, not because it's lost, but because we've turned away. We avoid the one journey that actually leads us home, the journey within." One of Jung's most powerful ideas is the concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, or reject. You know that feeling when someone annoys you and you can't explain why, or when you react to something far more intensely than the situation calls for. That's often your shadow showing up. Not to shame you, but to reveal you. Yet, most people run from it. We stay in the light, in the positive, pretending we're always good, always okay. But Jung warned us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Let that sink in. Enlightenment doesn't come from pretending. It comes from integration, from the courage to sit with your pain, your fear, your flaws, and not reject them, but understand them. Because the shadow isn't the enemy. The shadow is the doorway. In that temple, Jung felt so close to the center of truth, and yet he couldn't pass through. Why? Because even he, one of the most self-aware thinkers in history, still had more integrating to do. He hadn't fully faced everything within him. There was still more unconscious material that needed to be brought to light. Now imagine the average person living life on autopilot, avoiding discomfort, numbing emotions, scrolling endlessly to stay distracted. How many of us are truly doing the inner work? Jung's message is clear: if we never confront our shadows, if we never reconnect to the soul, we might live, but we'll never truly be alive. And when death comes, we won't be ready. Not because we didn't believe enough, but because we never truly knew ourselves. Jung didn't fear death. He feared a life unlived, a life so consumed by noise and distraction that we never ask the real questions. Who am I when no one's watching? What have I been avoiding? What part of me still hides in the dark? He believed that the soul constantly whispers to us through dreams, through illness, through synchronicities. But if we ignore those whispers long enough, they stop coming. And that's the tragedy he saw. Not punishment after death, but illusion during life. Jung didn't leave us in despair. He believed we could return to our center step by step, choice by choice, by becoming aware, by getting curious about our reactions, by being brave enough to ask, what is this feeling trying to teach me? He believed that every person has the potential to awaken, to step out of the ego's grip and return to the truth of the soul. But only if we stop running, only if we turn inward. And perhaps the temple he saw wasn't some distant place waiting for us after death, but a symbol of what we can build here, within ourselves now. A life where the outer world reflects the inner. A life where we don't need to be perfect, just honest, integrated, and fully present. If you take nothing else from this part of Jung's journey, let it be this: you don't need to chase the light. You need to embrace your whole self, light and shadow. Because the real danger is not dying. It's never truly waking up. And maybe that's what the temple whispered to Jung as it held him at the threshold. Not yet. Go back. There is more of you to reclaim. And maybe it's whispering to you now too. So you might be wondering, why should we care about what Carl Jung saw nearly 80 years ago during a near-death experience? Why should his vision of a glowing temple, a living mandala, and a warning about the ego still speak to us today? Here's the truth: because the very crisis Jung saw in the soul of mankind is happening right now, and maybe louder than ever. In our modern world, we've become obsessed with doing with achievement, productivity, performance. We track every minute chase, every milestone, and define our worth by how much we produce, how much we own, how much we're seen. But in the rush to build outer success, something sacred is getting lost. We've built taller buildings, but deeper emptiness. We've made everything smart, yet so many of us feel emotionally lost, disconnected, numb. And that's exactly what Jung warned about. We're more connected than ever, yet spiritually starved. Let's think about this for a second. We can connect to anyone in the world with one click. But how often do we truly connect to ourselves? When was the last time you sat in stillness, not scrolling, not planning, not reacting, but just listening to your own soul? Most of us aren't avoiding silence because we're too busy. We're avoiding it because silence confronts us with what's real, what's been buried, what's aching, what's unresolved. And Jung saw this as the core danger of modern life. We've made noise a lifestyle. And in that noise, we've forgotten how to hear ourselves. He once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. That's not just poetic. That's prophetic. Us losing the self in a world that worships image. In the digital age, we're constantly curating who we appear to be. Photos, likes, filters, titles, metrics, brands. But what about the self, the deeper essence Jung spoke of? The part of you that doesn't care how many followers you have, but does care if you feel whole. We've built our lives like palaces of glass, fragile, transparent, and always on display. But the soul isn't built in public. It's built in silence, in shadow, in inner honesty. And when we don't make time for that inner work, something painful happens. Anxiety increases, depression deepens, meaning starts to feel distant. Even success feels empty. Have you ever achieved something you thought would make you feel complete, only to find it left you hollow? Jung would say, that's the soul calling. It's not asking you to do more. It's asking you to return home. Carl Jung's vision wasn't about mysticism. It was a wake-up call. Some people hear about Jung's near-death experience and focus only on the mystical details, the temple, the glowing mandala, the floating above earth. But Jung himself made this clear. It wasn't about creating fantasy. It was about remembering reality. That temple he saw, it wasn't some faraway heaven. It was a symbol of what happens when you finally face yourself. That mandala, it was a mirror showing the structure of a soul that's balanced, integrated, whole. And that barrier that stopped him from entering, it was a reminder that even the wisest among us still have work to do. He didn't come back from that experience just to write a memoir. He came back with urgency, because he realized that most people are asleep to their own souls, living, breathing, working, but never truly awakening. So why does it matter to you and me? Because we're being offered the same choice Jung was shown. We can continue numbing ourselves, chasing productivity, applause, approval, while losing our essence one scroll at a time. Or we can pause, turn inward, and begin the work of remembering. Not remembering facts or goals or passwords, but remembering ourselves. Your soul doesn't speak through trends or emails. It speaks through longing, through discomfort, through quiet urges. And Jung's vision was never meant to be placed on a pedestal. It was meant to be lived by you, by me, by anyone willing to go deeper. A final reflection for this section. Carl Jung wasn't just a thinker. He was a seeker, a translator of the unconscious, a mapmaker for the soul. And what he brought back from that near-death threshold wasn't just a report of the afterlife. It was a call to the present life. A call to wake up before it's too late. To stop living from the outside in, and to start living from the inside out. Because the real temple isn't in the clouds, it's in your center, and it's waiting for you to return. So let's bring it all together. Carl Jung spent his entire life exploring the human psyche, mapping dreams, decoding symbols, peeling back the layers of the unconscious. But it wasn't until he stood at the edge of death that he truly touched the truth he had been chasing. In that sacred moment, what he saw wasn't just light or a temple or a symbol. He saw the soul alive, structured, evolving. And he realized something profound. It's not enough to think about the soul. You have to feel it, live it, become it. He came back with a warning and a gift. A warning that most of us are sleepwalking through life, driven by ego, distracted by noise, disconnected from our essence. And a gift, the reminder that awakening is always available if you're willing to look within. So, what if you were meant to hear this message today? What if this wasn't just a story about Carl Jung, but a sign for you that your soul is ready to remember? Don't wait for crisis to rediscover your center. Don't wait for the edge of life to ask the real questions. Because your temple, your mandala, your truth, they're already inside you. All you have to do is return.